Hi everyone, this is my second video and my name is Christian. Today I'm going to be talking about the book of Job. Job is one of those books that almost everyone knows. Even if they don't, even if they haven't read it or, finished it, it seems like everybody knows about this book and everybody knows that it's about suffering. But there are a couple of specific things that are important in this book that I would like to touch on today. And so the first thing is that Job doesn't even know what's going on in the first chapter. He has no idea why all these bad things are happening to him. And the second is that, the biggest change in Job happens before his circumstances change, right? So, with the first point in mind, I'm going to read chapter 1. Job's character and wealth. There was a man in the land of Uz, or it could be Uz, I actually don't know, whose name was Job, and that man was blameless and upright, one who feared God and turned away from evil. There were born to him 7 sons and 3 daughters. He possessed 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 female donkeys, and very many servants. And very many servants, so that this man was the greatest of all the people of the East. His sons used to go and hold a feast in the house of each one on his day, and they would send and invite their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. And when the days of the feast had run their course, Job would send and consecrate them, and he would rise early in the morning and offer burnt offerings according to the number of them all. For Job said, "It may be that my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts." Thus Job did continually. Satan allowed to test Job. Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. The Lord said to Satan, "From where have you come?" Satan answered the Lord and said, "From going to and fro on the earth, and from walking up and down on it." And the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil?" Then Satan answered the Lord and said, "Does Job fear God for no reason? Have you not put a hedge around him and his house and all that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. But stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and he will curse you to your face." And the Lord said to Satan, "Behold, all that he has is in your hand. Only against him do not stretch out your hand." So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. Satan takes Job's property and children. Now there was a day when his sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house. And there came a messenger to Job and said, "The oxen were plowing and the donkeys feeding beside them. And the Sabeans fell upon them and took them and struck down the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you." While he was yet speaking, there came another and said, "The fire of God fell from heaven and burned up the sheep and the servants and consumed them, and I alone have escaped to tell you." While he was yet speaking, there came another and said, "The Chaldeans formed 3 groups and made a raid on the camels, and took them and struck down the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you." While he was yet speaking, there came another and said, "Your sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house. And behold, a great wind came across the wilderness and struck the 4 corners of the house, and it fell upon the young people, and they are dead, and I alone have escaped to tell you." Then Job arose and tore his robe, and shaved his head, and fell on the ground and worshipped. And he said, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." In all this Job did not sin or charge God with wrong. So something that's, always stands out to me about Job is that, about the book of Job, is that we get this information that Job never gets. So, at the beginning of the book, we see this conversation between God and Satan. We know what's going on behind the scenes. we understand the context. So we know why this is happening to Job, but Job himself has no idea. As far as he knows, his life just completely falls apart for literally no reason. He has no more wealth, he has no more servants, he has no more children, and yet he never understands why, right? But something that, I think, if you put yourself in Job's position for a moment, you understand he has no explanation. His life is in turmoil. Um, but that's something that a lot of us can relate to today. Like, when something hard happens to us, when we go through something really bad, we usually want answers immediately. Why is this happening? Why now? Why me? What's the point? What's the reason? Why do I have to suffer? But Job stands to remind us that suffering, sometimes it happens for a specific reason and we just don't know why. But that doesn't mean that there isn't a reason behind it. You know, it also serves to remind us that a lot of the time we're operating with incomplete information. So there could be things that we simply can't see or understand. We don't have the full context. We don't have the big picture. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't ask questions. It doesn't mean that we don't pray. It doesn't mean that we can't question why something is happening to us. It certainly doesn't mean suffering is any easier, but it does remind us that our perspective right now is limited. And so, like just as Job never had the full picture, neither do we most of the time. So I think that's important to take away from the first chapter of the book of Job. And another thing I would say that's really important about this chapter is that he still doesn't blame God. After everything that happens to him, he doesn't say, he doesn't curse God. He doesn't start sinning. He doesn't say, well, you did this, God, or anything. He immediately goes and praises God, which is important because sometimes we want to know, hey, why aren't you coming down and fixing this for me? But we have to also recognize that we're not the only person suffering, and that we have to know that sometimes there is a reason. We also have to know that it's not God that's causing that suffering. We're given free will, so with that free will, somebody else who has free will, they have the ability to do things to us that may cause suffering on our end. It doesn't make it right, but it also, you have to know, it doesn't mean that it's God who's doing it. But yeah, so now I will read the end of the book, which is going to go to chapter 42, I think it is, 42. It's been a long time since I read Job. Here we go. Yeah, this has to be this is the last chapter. Okay, so here we go. Job's confession and repentance. Then Job answered the Lord and said, I know that you can do all things and that no purpose of yours can be thwarted. Who is this that hides counsel without knowledge? Therefore I have uttered what I did not understand, things too wonderful for me, which I did not know. Hear and I will speak. I will question you, and you will make it known to me. I had heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eye sees you. Therefore I despise myself and repent in dust and ashes. So this is just 1 to 6, but it's one of the most powerful, it's one of the most powerful moments in the entire book of Job. I think a lot of people think that this, the ending of Job is when everything gets better for him, or, he gets everything that he lost back. But that's actually not at this, this isn't what's happening here. So Job is saying, I had heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eyes sees you. And then, this is essentially showing that it's, what I love about it is that Job's circumstances have not changed yet. So he doesn't have anything yet. I mean, he doesn't gain anything back or anything at this point. But something changes within him. His understanding of God is deeper than it was before. And another thing, that's important is that in this book, God never actually sits Job down and explains himself, really. He never says, here's exactly why all of this happened. Here's why I let it happen. He doesn't give Job this explanation that I think that we as readers expect. But instead, Job encounters God, and that encounter becomes, probably the most important thing. I mean, it's more important than getting any answer, which can be difficult for us because as humans, we like to get an explanation. We want to know, why did this person do this to me? Why are there people that feel these things that are immoral or something like that? Or, why do these people do things to other people? I mean anything, things, all the things, I don't have to list them, things that are just inherently immoral. There are people that do those things. There are people that enjoy doing those things. And you can sit there and, try to explain it away. Well, they're sick, they're this, they're that, they're a bad person, but you never fully get, an explanation isn't, we want an explanation, we want a deeper explanation every time, because we want things to make sense, but no matter what explanation we get for things like this, it just doesn't make sense. For example, my cousin did something really bad to me when I was a kid. I'm not going to get into the details, but I often find myself asking, why would my cousin do something like that? What made her do the thing that she did to me? And I can sit here and say, well, she's sick, she's immoral, this and that. But at the end of the day, every time I'm wondering, those aren't the explanations I want, because it's still kind of like this, there's always still that why, like it doesn't fully answer it. Because I think that's just how we are. I'm getting off topic, but, going back to Job, this story, or Job's life, it reminds us that faith isn't about having every answer, It's about trusting God even when we don't understand everything. And going back to what I just mentioned regarding my own trauma from when I was a child, regarding my cousin, that is something that I have to do. Like I struggle with those thoughts of remembering the bad things that somebody did to me when I was little. But I also ultimately, I know I have to trust God, because even though I don't understand why somebody could hurt somebody else like that, I have to know that, there is something that came out of that suffering. I just don't know the full picture. I know that God knows, and that's why I have to trust God. But yeah, so the biggest lesson about Job, I would say, or the biggest thing that I would get from it is, it's not always about suffering itself. That is a big part of it. But it's also about perspective. It's, that Job doesn't know what's happening behind the scenes. He doesn't have all this information. He has less information than we do. And then even at the end, God doesn't even explain himself. Well, he doesn't explain everything. But yet Job comes away with a deeper understanding of who God is. And that's something that's, that's worth remembering. It's worth taking away. It's worth applying to your own life, your own struggles. And it's also important to acknowledge also that, as humans, most of the time, yes, we want explanations. We want timelines. We want every single thing answered. But that's just not That's not how it is. And God has every right to operate in the way that he sees fit, you know? Um, the book of Job does, you know, it reminds us that God is still God, even when we don't have all the answers. So, you know, I could wake up tomorrow with a really bad terminal illness and I won't know why. But at the end of the day, God is still God. And, you know, it doesn't matter if I know why or not. Um, I mean, you know, not that it doesn't matter, but it wouldn't change the fact that God is still operating behind the scenes. And that's part of faith, you know, walking by faith, not by sight. Um, you know, we don't know everything, but we have to continue to trust in him anyway. We have to, you know, remind ourselves that, look, I don't know why somebody did something that hurt me. I don't know why I'm sick right now. I don't know why I lost my job. I don't know why this happened. I don't know why that happened. But I have to know that at the end of the day, if nobody is, you know, there for me, God is still there for me. He's still there with me. Um, and I think it's hard for a lot of us to, you know, to feel that way. Well, how can I trust him? How can I, you know, just believe that he's there? How can I even know that he, you know, even cares about me? And I've struggled with that a lot myself, and you know, I still do continue to struggle with it due to self-esteem issues. But um, it's important, I think, to know that, you know, the more you talk to God, you don't talk to him really necessarily to change his mind, but it's more so praying helps with you to get to know him, and that increases your trust. And another thing that I try to look at it as like, my trust issues with him are not on him, you know, like that's not because of him, that's because of me. Um, he does not owe me coming down and saying, you know, I'm here and I really am here and I'm gonna hold your hand and I'm gonna, you know, do all of this and whatever. He doesn't have to do that. I mean, he doesn't have to do anything he doesn't want to do. He didn't even have to create me. So, you know, the trust, it's my job to trust. And if I don't trust it, if I'm struggling with trust, I go to him and I say, can you help me to trust in you, help me to have faith. But but I'm not gonna say like, you know, I'm not gonna put it on him as if, you know, the reason that I don't trust is because God is not doing enough. And that's very important with Job. You know, he there's nothing that he does that he just, everything that he goes through, he doesn't blame God for it. And that's something that a lot of us struggle to do. That's something that I've struggled with. So, yeah, I think that's a very important lesson from the book of Job. It is something that it's made me more aware of that, like, you know, trying to not blame God for things and trying to also think about, you know, all of the times that God has been there for me. So even times that I probably don't even know. I mean, there could be, you know, a whole bunch of stuff that could have happened to me that I wouldn't even know that God saved me from a situation. Um, but yeah, so I'm kind of rambling now, and I don't want to like keep ranting because then I feel like people are gonna be like, okay, shut up. But yeah, so I'm thinking about. I really like Ecclesiastes, but I also really like the Book of Psalms. I love Proverbs. It would be nice if I could do something from the New Testament soon, since I'm doing a lot of Old Testament things so far. And I just mentioned a whole bunch of Old Testament books that I like. So I think for the next video, maybe I'll do something regarding the New Testament. My favorite book in the New Testament, um, I have a couple actually, because I really like Titus and I really like Revelation, but I love I think more than anything, I have to say my favorite would be the Gospel of John. So I will go with that, especially because it's the perfect opportunity to talk about Jesus, him coming to, to us, and it's just, yeah, I love the Gospel of John so much. So I think that's probably where I'll go for my next video. But I'm gonna be jumping around because I do that. So yeah. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.